In this video, I finally tried out film photography for the very first time. I went into my shed to uncover a long forgotten film camera that's been tucked away in my household for years. And as often happens when you're sifting through remnants of the past, I stumbled upon a few nostalgic treasures from my childhood. Among them was a teddy bear I was quite fond of, which I vaguely recall my parents getting it for me at a small flea market. Next is a quirky Game Boy contraption that shoots out a ball. Honestly, I'm not too sure about the purpose of this toy, but I remember playing with it quite often. Additionally, I found some old Digimon cards. Although I never played with them, I was always captivated by the artwork on the cards. But the real star of this story is the film camera I found, the Nikon EM. This camera's design exudes a vintage charm which, in my opinion, captures the essence of film cameras. Now, I have to admit, the discovery of this camera didn't happen quite as magically as the opening of this video might suggest. The truth is, I bought this camera back in high school on eBay. But despite my fascination with film photography at the time, I never actually used it. The idea of shooting with a film camera intrigued me, but once I had the camera in hand, the process seemed, well, daunting to say the least. Due to the film camera's analog nature, the learning curve felt steep. Though the novelty of shooting on film was what drove me to spend my hard-earned savings on this camera, I never found the time or courage to fully dive in. So, like many things, the Nikon EM ended up on the back burner, gathering dust in my bedroom cupboard. Until now. This is the Nikon EM. My first impressions? It feels solid and comfortable to hold with just the right amount of weight. Not too heavy but substantial enough. It's equipped with a 50mm lens, and while the camera shows its age with a bit of dust, a good clean should bring it back to top shape. To get to know this camera better, I did some research. It turns out the Nikon EM is an aperture priority automatic camera, meaning you set the lens aperture and the camera takes care of the exposure, such as the shutter speed. It seems like a great option for a beginner like myself. However, I'm a little skeptical that this will work due to the age of the camera. I would prefer to change the shutter speed myself, but this doesn't seem to be an option. There is, however, an option to set it to a fixed shutter speed of 1/90th of a second. My favorite feature has to be the winding lever. It has a unique knee joint that flips out when you use it and clicks back into place when you're done. Lightly pressing the shutter button activates the meter, and inside the viewfinder, a needle on the left indicates the chosen shutter speed. The whole process of using this camera actually seems straightforward. So where do I actually start? First, I needed to load film into the camera, which was a bit of a challenge since I didn't own any film at all. I went online to buy some, only to be overwhelmed by the sheer variety of film stock available. And to be honest, it wasn't exactly cheap. After some consideration, I decided on the Kodak Ultramax 400. The higher the ISO number, in which this case is 400, the more sensitive the film is to light, making it better for low light situations. I also noticed that the higher the ISO, the more expensive the film tends to be. In my case, Kodak Ultramax 400 seemed like a versatile choice with its ISO 400, allowing me to shoot in a wide variety of lighting conditions. It was also one of the more affordable options, which definitely influenced my decision. The characteristics of this film are known for being saturated and punchy. Though I wasn't too concerned about the colors this time around, since my main goal was to experiment with film photography. After watching an online tutorial on how to load film into this specific camera, I got the general idea of how to do it. I was pretty nervous about loading the film because I was afraid of doing it incorrectly and accidentally exposing too much of the film to light, rendering it unusable. but I managed to load it into the camera, and I guess we'll see later if I was successful in getting some decent photos. I ended up visiting 2 locations, focusing primarily on landscapes rather than people. A quick heads up, the photos I took are far from perfect. However, I'll be including all the photos I took because I want to document my experience using film for the first time. So, without further ado, here are the results from my Nikon EM. Alright, let's do a quick recap. First off, the photos I took didn't turn out as well as I'd hoped, though I actually expected them to be much worse. For instance, the first few shots I took came out quite blurry and overexposed. I'm not entirely sure if it was because the light meter wasn't functioning properly, or if it's because my aperture was too wide for those particular shots. However, the lighting conditions that day were overcast but still fairly bright. Despite that, the light meter kept indicating a need for a long shutter speed, which didn't make much sense. While these photos might not be technically perfect, I actually find some of them quite appealing. The unintended blur and brightness create a dreamy and mysterious vibe that gives the photos a unique character. The rest of the garden series turned out better exposure-wise, although I found some of the shots a bit generic. My favourites were probably the tree and the Japanese dry garden in terms of composition. With the sunset photos, I decided to push my luck and shoot during the golden hour, but I hadn't anticipated the crowds that evening. I ended up having to park far away and hike up a hill to reach my spot. By the time I got there, the sun was already setting, and as expected, some of the shots were a bit blurry. Despite the lighting conditions, I think they could have turned out better if I used a tripod. That said, the haziness actually adds to their aesthetic, and the pink-red hues of the sky were stunning. Overall, the learning process of film photography turned out to be really enjoyable, and through making this video, I've gained a much greater appreciation for it. One aspect of film photography that I really enjoy is the limited number of exposures you have on each roll. With only a set number of photos to take, you have to be more deliberate about what you're capturing. Especially with an SLR camera, each shot requires careful setup due to varying light conditions. Although, in my case, I didn't really have to do much with the Nikon EM other than changing the aperture and manually focusing the lens. It kind of felt like a glorified point-and-shoot camera. I also love the element of surprise in film photography. Though you have a general idea of the composition, there's no instant feedback. You can't even see the final product until the film is developed. The graininess and unique colors of film photos bring a sense of nostalgia and authenticity that adds to the charm. This makes film photography compelling, and I can finally understand its enduring popularity and appeal. I'm eager to try other film stocks in the future and maybe even explore point-and-shoot cameras as an alternative. This certainly won't be the last time I shoot on film, and who knows, I might bring this Nikon EM on my future travels as a second camera. Or I probably might go hunting for another film camera that gives me more control with my exposure factors. If you have any recommendations for film cameras or film stocks, please let me know in the comments. Well, I think I'm going to wrap this video up. Thanks for watching my first proper video on YouTube, and I hope to see you on the next one.